Hello, and welcome to Warhammer 40k's Grim History from the Beyond. I'm Zeckthar,
And I'm Yuksen.
and we are the chroniclers of all that was, and all that will be in the 41st millennium. We've seen the rise and fall of many empires, and this month we'll be discussing the mysterious militant wing of the Ordo Xenos, the Deathwatch.
Indeed. This month we will chronicle their strange organizational structure, what impact they have had on the Imperium, and of course, notable characters. Alright, Zeckthar, what are we going to be talking about this week?
Well, this week, we will be discussing some of the more notable action these guys have gotten into. And I figured, what better way to start than you discussing the Gosar Quintus anomaly?
Fantastic. Now, the
Yes.
planet Gosar Quintus was ruled by the Trist dynasty for several centuries. Yet in 680.M41, a major gene-stealer cult of the Four-Armed Emperor infestation was discovered by Inquisitor Chagrin upon the world. He also figured out that the Trist dynasty had come under the control of a gene-stealer patriarch. The gene-stealer got to the planet hidden in a piece of a fragment that broke away from the Curse of Unreason space hulk that fell on the planet at the beginning of M40. And the governor's family was purged by a Deathwatch kill team led by Orton Cassius in the first major Imperial encounter with gene-stealers. Investigating what appeared to be a perversion of the Imperial Creed, Inquisitor Chagrin led a team of Tempestus Scions to Gosar Quintus and ventured into the depths of the Great Pit, the greatest mining complex present on the world. The deeper Chagrin ventured, the more evidence of deviance he found. Strangely, his last communique stated that all was well and that the Trist dynasty should be left to its own devices. It was a full year before Chagrin's fellows noticed that something was deeply wrong. A 5-man kill team of Deathwatch Space Marines named Kill Team Exus was sent on a follow-up mission of lethal investigation. Yet they too were swallowed by the mysteries of the Great Pit and hadn't survived the initial ambush. Only when Chaplain Cassius mustered his own hand-picked kill team was the vile truth unearthed. Gosar Quintus was home to Xenos infestation. Kill Team Cassius fought through hundreds of gene-stealer cultists as they plumbed the depths of the Trist dynasty's corrupted world. Though they had made it out alive, and Cassius himself killed the gene-stealer patriarch, the Space Marines were changed forever by the gruesome ordeal. Most shocking of all was not the gene-stealer patriarch that lurked at the heart of the cult, but the damning evidence in the mining cult's shipping holographs. Under the guise of industry, the Xenos-tainted Trist dynasty had spread its curse across not only the Gosar system, but throughout the sector. As of now, this curse, known as the Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor, now exists across many worlds in Ultima Segmentum. The cult has come to specialize in mining, burrowing, and subterranean exploration, and in war are known for their ambush, demolition, and mining tactics. They are one of the few gene-stealer cults that plan to spread on a galactic level as opposed to merely planetary.
Yes. Well, this sounds very much like that song.
It was a one-eyed, four-armed, flying purple people leader.
Anyways. So do you know how far
These would actually eat people.
What's that?
But
Well,
these
remember-
wouldn't care of who they ate.
We're remembering the song anyways. He didn't eat the guy because he looked too tough. So maybe he was talking to a Deathwatch guy. What did he do? You look too tough. Anyways, so how far do you think, anyways, this mining cults? Because it sounds like, anyways, they've. Okay, one of the weird things about these guys is that most of the time when you talk about gene stealers, they corrupt the planet and then they send out the beacon, right?
Right.
So the Tyranids show up to this planet and they consume everything in the planet, right?
Right.
These guys aren't doing that, are they?
No, not really.
They're like spreading across the galaxy.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
One of the things that they do to expand is rather than like, for example, spraying in secret, like I'll hide in a little closet here or whatever there. What they do is basically they create their own workforce and then send them out.
Right. Well, no, I get that. And well, the terrifying part about that is that these mining ships, they're relocating to different planets all over the place in the Imperium. And anyways, that those miners that are infested by the gene stealers they're not all getting back on the ship. So
Right.
they can continue to spread. So I guess my question to you anyways is how far do you think they have spread? And is there any way at this point anyways to put the cat back in the bottle, so to speak?
It would take a very long time and resources that I don't think that anybody has to expend at this point in time.
Do you think at this point anyways is pretty much impossible?
Well, my guess is they've probably pretty much infected almost every single planet of the Ultima Segmentum. Wouldn't surprise me.
The only thing that I could think of them doing anyways is looking through the holographs anyways of this mining station and seeing all the places that they have landed and then like quarantining them.
But then you have to take into the fact that, and then those places have sent other cultists to other planets, and those planets have sent them to other places. So it'd be like, okay, let me see if I can actually find where the end of this thing is.
You'd have to find the end of the trail, so to speak. And that's where you start your quarantine and you work backwards from that. And then you would have to find all the gene stealers on each planet and then just slowly work back from there. Or you could do whatever Inquisitor really wants to do anyways and just blow up all those planets. Exterminatus. Just boom.
Well, I think I've discussed enough today about gene stealers and Tyranids. How about you discuss the dealings of the Deathwatch on Damnos, fighting the undying Xenos, known as the Necrons?
Certainly. Now, first off, you must understand, Damnos is a cursed planet for the Imperium, that is. The main reason for that is that it's not their planet. It's the Necron tomb world. Humans figured this out around 973.M41. And as per usual, it didn't go well. The Necrons woke up and they exterminated all on their planet, which makes sense. Despite the Inquisition's efforts to suppress all knowledge of the Necrons' reemergence into the galaxy, the Imperium's faith in its military supremacy was shaken by the news that spread across the galaxy after 974.M41. That these Xenos had overcome both the Imperial Guard and the Ultramarines at Damnos. Now, for most, this might make sense. You landed on a planet and tried to settle it, but it wasn't yours, and the natives had a problem with it and killed those that tried to colonize their planet. Perhaps most would try to send a peaceful diplomats to try to barter and gain a trading partner to further.
You serious? This is the Imperium of Man. No way they did that, you silly.
Well, I had actually kind of hoped. It would have been far more interesting than what took place. But anyways, like you said,
Orcs have done diplomatic things before.
What's that?
Ironically, even orcs have done tried diplomacy before.
It's kind of sad. Well, okay, humanity has used some diplomatic means with other alien races before, but normally it's pretty much what Tau and the Eldar, right?
Well, the Eldar, it took a really long time, I think.
The Eldar. Yeah. Anyways, like you said, brother, eventually reports of the loss of Damnos made their way to Terra, where both the Fabricator General of the Adeptus Mechanicus and the High Lords of Terra decreed that the Ultramarines must return to Damnos and eradicate the Necron threat once and for all. 25 standard years after the Damnos incident, in 999.M41, because everything that takes place that's important takes place in 999.M41. Sorry.
Of course.
everything. It's like everything took place in that year.
Because that's when
998
started and everything.
It's like, what happened in 998.m41? Nobody cares. Nothing happened.
Somebody kicked an orc and then got shot. That's it.
The chronological order, anyways, for 998.m41 reads as follows. Someone kicked an orc and got shot. The grain product was good this year. That's it.
And Armageddon continues to war.
Yes. Anyways, sorry. This Imperial Order was brought to Macrogg by the experienced Deathwatch strike team led by Squad Lazarus. Chapter Master Marnius Galgar was not pleased with the Imperium's decree, for he knew that his second company had faced only a fraction of the awakened Necrons on Damnos, a quarter of a Terran century before. Once they returned to Damnos, the Ultramarines would face the entire strength of the Necron Tomb World and risk the deaths of hundreds of his chapter's Astartes. Yet, Calgar knew that the High Lords of Terror were right, and that the Necrons on Damnos must be defeated if the Imperium was ever to know peace in the face of the growing Necron threat. With the record of the Ultramarines stained by the actions of Damnos, it was their duty to banish the ghosts of the past. Upon hearing Calgar's announcement that the Ultramarines' 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 5th, and 6th companies, accompanied by the elements of the 10th, would return to reclaim Damnos for the Emperor. So excited by the news of returning to Damnos that the venerable Captain Cato Sicarius smiled for the first time in solar decades. It is said that during the preparation for the assault, Sicarius trained so hard that he fought with the fury of a man possessed and even slept in the cage vault. Before the solar month was out, Kelgar's armies and fleets had been assembled and over 500 space marines stood ready for war.
Only 500?
Yes, that's what I have here. Although they did take with them the Lazarus kill team, which is important to the rest of the story.
So let me make sure I got this right. They figure that they can take out an entire tomb world, which is 500 guys and a Deathwatch kill team.
Yeah.
That's
Yes, well, in addition, Sicarius was granted a vortex grenade by the Deathwatch Sergeant Davian Mockley's, who is rumored to be an old friend and former squad mate.
excuse me, brother, but what's a vortex grenade?
Yeah, well, the designs of the grenade date back to the age of technology, making it actually a very rare weapon. So, of course, the Deathwatch have it. When the grenade is activated, it creates a tiny rift between real space and the warp, a rift that becomes a vortex in the very fabric of space-time. In appearance, the vortex is a ball of glowing blackness, like a small black hole. Everyone and everything encompassed by the vortex is destroyed. All matter and energy present is drawn through the vortex and consumed by the psychic energy of the warp. Warp vortexes are incredibly dangerous, as once they are created, they behave in an unpredictable and uncontrollable manner. They may shrink, expand, vanish, remain for long periods of time, move, or even divide. For this reason, vortex grenades can prove as deadly to their user as their intended target.
Okay,
So,
you ever notice how almost all amazing gadgets come from the age of technology? So nobody can remember how it's actually made because it's the age of technology.
okay, now it does kind of make sense, though, right? I mean, the age of technology was like the greatest age of man, all the way up until they created things, anyways, that just started killing them. I mean,
And then they decide, let's dump all schematics and things into the garbage.
It was a time, and I did a little bit about this, anyways. When I briefly talked about the age of technology when I started talking about the unification wars. But it was a time, anyways, when science was continuing to advance. I mean, we have talked many a times, Yuksen, about how stagnant the Imperium is right now. But every once in a while, somebody grabs one of these things from the age of technology, and everyone's like, "That is so cool! How does it work?" I don't know. Then why are you using it? It goes boom. I mean, If someone handed me a vortex grenade, well, okay, first off, anyways, somebody handed us a vortex grenade, we'd probably take it back to the shop and figure out how it worked first. But most people, anyways, if I was a normal person, I'd probably be just like, I ain't touching that thing.
Or it'd be like, yes, let's destroy everything. I don't care.
Just get this mental image of a guy, anyways, setting this thing off and throwing it and just watching in horror as it starts to come towards him and he runs away and just chases him wherever he goes. Very much like the Terran 42 Scooby-Doo scene, you know, where they're running between doors. Except for this would be a vortex anyways. It would just go right through the door and then come out the other side. But anyways, getting back to the story. The journey to Damnos was a perilous one, with Kelgar relying on various ruses and distractions to get his warriors safely to the planet's surface. By the time the Necrons had spotted the true location of the Ultramarine warships, the Astartes fleet was in position to launch their drop pods. The first wave consisted of unmanned variants designed to draw the fire of the Gauze pylons. The second wave, however, represented the true assault, which brought hundreds of Space Marines, as well as a number of vengeful Imperial Guard regiments, to the heart of the Necron subterranean tomb complex. Oh, okay, so they did actually bring some Imperial Guard with them, Yuksen.
Well, they have to have some sort of meat shield.
They need the meat shield. Yeah, I was about to say. But, okay, so from what I've read anyways, it's an undetermined amount of Imperial Guard. I would assume there'd be more than 500 of them. Probably, I would think anyways, probably about maybe 100,000. What do you think? It's a good ballpark.
Maybe. And what
Probably
makes them vengeful?
What's that?
Like, how many of them have been around for the past, how long has it been?
25 years.
25 years?
Yeah, that's not bad.
Well,
Anyways,
first of all, how many of them would be around from the first attack?
I don't know, Yuksen. Anyways, that's what you're hung up on anyways, is how many of them are vengeful, not how many of them are actually there. To me, anyways, that's a more important number. I don't care if there's 500,000 of them, but we only have 5 vengeful ones. Cool. I don't care. But I would assume it's somewhere, though, the number of Imperial Guard, probably somewhere between 100 and 500,000, right? Especially if you've got 500 Space Marines going into battle.
I would find probably more of them being artillery pieces, so maybe not that much.
Oh, really? Okay.
Because as we know, the Imperial Guard, one of the things they are great is using artillery pieces.
Yeah, and tankety tank stuff.
Yeah.
So
Whereas
more like
Space Marines tanks, well, we have 7 variants or something like that. Imperial Guard, we have 50.
The correct answer is tanks. We are tanks. Okay, sorry. Down the rabbit trail. We got to keep going.
You can't bombard at like miles away, can you? Oh, well.
We could try.
Yeah.
Anyways, now, moving on. Their objective was to destroy the pyramidal complexes that control the Necron power grid, and to do it before the Imperial forces were overwhelmed. However, one factor that they did not account for was the physical incarnation of a Catan shard of Igrania, the World Shaper, held within a Tesseract vault. It was determined that this vault was the true source of the Necron's power and must be neutralized if the Imperial forces were to have any hope of victory. Despite the power brought to bear by the Imperial assault on Damnos, Marneus Calgar felt like a duelist being taken apart by a superior foe in the battle cage. The Xenos battle logic proved impeccable, with its master intelligence anticipating the Ultramarines' every move and neutralizing each tactic they employed. Thanks to an energy shield emitting from the vault, every plasma volley and melta blast employed against the Necron monoliths dissipated harmlessly or detonated prematurely before it could harm the constructs. Since the Xenos had managed to analyze the Ultramarines' battle doctrine, Kelgar realized he must attempt a completely unexpected stratagem. Assaulting the ranks of the Necron...
They read the space book.
Sorry, say that again, Yuksen?
So you mean they read the space book?
I'm guessing that's what happened. They probably got it from another Necron that we all know and love. Anyways, assaulting the ranks of the Necron Immortals, the Chapter Master jumped onto the metallic base of a malfunctioning gauze pylon and slowly pushed the war engine's crescent back into its Viridian beam hit the energy field of the floating necropolis. With a blinding flash of light, the energy shield protecting the tomb complex collapsed, and the Tesseract vault was broken wide open to reveal the enraged demigod imprisoned within. The giant cruciform of pure light rose above the Necron army. The remnants of the Catan energy cage still crackled around it, roaring in exultation at its newfound freedom. The booming sound threw Ultramarines and Necrons alike to the icy ground and cracked the planet's crust. Its first victim would be the Necron Overlord, the Undying, which the Star God crushed with ease by transforming the Earth around his metallic form into an oversized fist. The Overlord phased out of reality, seeking to escape back to his subterranean lair. But deep underground, the surviving members of the Deathwatch squad, Lazarus, had reached their own objective. The Undying teleported back to his cabled sarcophagus, right in front of the Deathwatch's eyes. Unfortunately for the Necron, the crack team of Astartes had replaced his revivification engines with melta-charges and entropic destabilizers and proceeded to blast the Necron Overlord into atoms. Back on the surface, the Xenos reeled from the loss of their leader and the artificially intelligent command programs that had governed their warriors' every action. Meanwhile, the unleashed Catan lashed out in fury at both its Necron enslavers and the Ultramarines as Captain Sicarius dueled a Flayed One's lord. After ramming his power sword into the powerful Flayed One's torso, Sicarius summoned 25 Terran years of anger and frustration into a final burst of strength. He unclipped the vortex grenade that had been given to him earlier and activated the weapon before throwing it at the enraged demigod hovering overhead. The grenade detonated and formed a spiraling orb of nothingness as its unstoppable force sucked the Catan into the warp before collapsing and winking out of existence. Sicarius felt a great weight lift in that moment as he realized both he and the Ultramarines had been redeemed for their original failure on Damnos in the sight of the Emperor. Over the next few solar days, the Imperials eliminated the surviving Necrons with grim efficiency. Empty tomb complexes were collapsed or detonated under the guidance of the Deathwatch, and the citizens of Damnos, whom Sicarius had rescued solar decades before, were restored to the world to reclaim it for their own.
So they did conquer the world?
Yeah, they actually did. But the Necrons actually came back. In fact, the Zerakhan dynasty descended upon Damnos during the era Indominus. Now, we're not going to talk about that, though, because it has nothing to do with the Deathwatch, although the Ultramarines come back, and a few other Astartes chapters end up helping them as well, and as far as I know, it's still going on to this very day. But I think this battle is important because it shows us how the Deathwatch commonly will work with other Astartes chapters.
What do you mean?
Well, okay, correct me if I'm wrong about this, Yuksen, but normally, anyways, when the Deathwatch works with other Space Marine chapters, they normally... I would say the Purgatus is probably the most commonly used because they're there to give information to the Astartes around them so that they can, truck forward and kill the Xenos. At the same time, they're also there anyways to eliminate leaders, to help anyways push forward anyways the normal legions.
It depends on what chapter they're dealing with, though.
Okay, well,
probably if they were dealing with the Black Templars, they'd go, do whatever you want. We don't care. You're going to listen to us. So
probably don't deal a whole lot with the Black Templars, but okay, other than the Black Templars, you do bring up kind of a good point. So I would say, anyways, this definitely, anyways, would be something that I would think is very common with like the Ultramarines or the Imperial Fists or even the Crimson Fists. But what do you think, anyways, that they probably do the same thing with, like, for instance, the Raven Guard, who tactics are completely different? That's why I bring them up.
Yeah, it truly depends on the mentality, I assume, of the Space Marine chapters. Like, if it's one of the more proud ones, I'd find it that they'd be less likely to have advisors at all, and they want to either move independently or say, "Hey, we're here."
Well, okay, I don't mean like
What they
they're. I don't mean that like they're going to have like an advisor. So I don't think, anyways, there was a Deathwatch guy that was just kind of tootling around behind Marnie Cal. I do think, though, anyways, that they were actually sending out like information, and before they actually left for the world, they said, "Hey, by the way, these are things, anyways, that we know work better, anyways, when you fight Necrons."
Well, apparently Marnie Cal didn't ask for that information, or else he probably would have done a better job.
Well, okay, so
I'm guessing it depends on how, the mentality of the chapter or the person who's in charge of command.
right. Okay, so let me get it to this point, anyways, which I think is actually probably a more important question. How do you think that Space Marine chapters deal with the Death Watch? Do you think it's amicable? Do you think it's like, well, okay, I guess we have to deal with you because we made that pact all those years ago? Do you think it's just like, oh, hey, we're glad that you're here? I mean, what do you think the relationship is with the Space Marine Astartes and then the Death Watch?
Okay, if it was something like probably like the Black Templar or one of those other ones that maybe some of the ones that are more emphatic on we must follow these specific rules, they probably have issues with them because as we've mentioned before, they do not follow the space book.
The Space Book. Well, neither do the Black Templar.
Well, in all aspects they do, except for what?
It's that old saying, anyways, where the Ultramarines are sitting around and they go, the space book says we can't do this. The space book says it's bad. And they get to the one Templar guy and he goes, oh, yeah? Well, I can't read. Yeah, anyways.
It's probably chapters that
So what you're saying, Yuksen, is that you think it changes between chapters?
yes.
Okay.
Or even sometimes just between the commanders that are there.
So you think, like, for instance, if instead of Marnie Cal actually running this thing, it was actually Kato, it would have been completely different?
With Kato, they probably would have been more hands off because of the fact that he's so forward driven during this point of time to let's slaughter as much as we can. They'd probably be even more going, okay, you do you, we'll do what we do. Probably why Maris Kelgar probably went, yeah, I'm gonna be leading this. Not just because the High Lords say that I am. Probably be wise if I did.
It might also have been that he was bored. Marnie likes to go to war, but a lot of times he's stuck on McCrog anyways, dealing with paperwork. This time, anyways, he probably got that note and went, yes! Assemble the men! We do have to move on. And why don't you talk about the Crown of the Beast next? It's actually one of my favorites.
Nope.
Oh, why not?
Like I said, I'm done talking about the bugs. I'm tired of the scuttling creatures that have no character. All they do is eat and sleep, sleep and eat.
But this one has your favorite Inquisitor Cryptman in it. And it's actually about your favorite Xenos, the Orks. Do it for Snot Rock.
Bah, fine. And yes, I do know that the Tyranids do more than just sleep and eat. It's just
They do something else?
Yes.
Really?
They hunt. They don't just eat. They have to hunt and hunt.
I believe the term you're looking for, Yuksen, is splitting hairs. But anyways,
No,
go
that's
ahead.
the term you're looking for. Anyways, the disaster known as the Valeria expedition was organized after Inquisitor Thuckles Van Roth grew concerned at the state of the Tyranid and Orc War.
What war was that again?
That would be the Octarius War.
Oh, yeah, right. That's the one that Cryptman started in an attempt to stop High Fleet Leviathan, right?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Now, prior to the expedition, Deathwatch kill teams from the Eye of Octos discovered an orc mech invention created by self-appointed King Mech Bad Crasher. This invention was a device that could actually disrupt the synaptic control signals of the Tyranids.
Really? You mean this bad crasher created a device that could actually disrupt the control that larger Tyranids have with the rest of them?
Yep. And
That's-
this is the crown known as this is the crown of the beast. That-
But that's
yeah.
actually pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
I wonder how much of this had to do with WOG energy as opposed to actual, like technological advancement. But
Well,
anyway, sorry.
we'll get to that.
Mm.
Well, anywho, the Deathwatch from Watch Company Secundus under Watch Captain Deos Glicus successfully seized the device, which was embedded into the King Mech's own skull as a crown. Glicus delivered the device to Van Roth, who sought to use it to turn the tide of the war.
Hang on a second.
Yes?
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong on this, Yuksen, but orc weapons and tech are normally notoriously only work for orcs, right? Unless your name is Jurgen. They seem to only work for orcs, right?
In most cases, yes. There have been some cases, like for example, with Jurgen, some weapons also are created basically from Imperial weapons, and so some of them may actually still be workable.
But the majority of them don't work for anybody else.
The majority of them, yeah, don't work.
So I guess my question is why on earth did they think that it would work for them, this device?
Well, the whole idea is to actually figure out if it could.
If it could work?
Yes, for them, if they could find some sort of way to create a Imperial variation of it.
Right. The concept that they could actually get something orky to work for them, sounds like they're really grasping at straws here. Am I right about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the overarching idea for this was, let's see how it works and see if we can find a way to create a facsimile of it.
Okay. That makes more sense. Sorry. Carry on, sir.
I think that's what their overarching goal was anyways. But also at the same time, we should see if this works normally.
Right.
And cross our fingers.
Fortunately, it goes south so hard for him. But sorry. Go ahead.
Van Roth eventually decided to experiment with the device on the Paterius Belt, an area believed to have been decimated entirely by Simhan of the Bieltan crafts worlds. However, at the maiden world of Veloria, orcs and Tyranids fought in isolation, making it a perfect testing ground. Or so they thought anyways. For the operation, Van Roth organized the Deathwatch, numerous Imperial Guard regiments, Militarum Tempestus, and clades of the Magos Biologists. He also acquired Freeblade Knights, such as Impervious Rex, the Scod, and the White Warden.
I got one more question for you here. So, like you said, anyways, they thought that this was the perfect testing ground.
Yeah.
What?
Because what could go wrong, right?
I was gonna say they don't have labs in the Imperium anymore. We couldn't test this anywhere other than in the field. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. This is so dumb.
Van Roth began field testing. Oh, by the way, for those who don't know, Freeblade Knights are basically Imperial Knights that have basically split all ties or so for some other reason no longer hold any allegiance to any knight houses.
Oh, so they're kind of like Ronin?
Yeah. Or in case of one of them, I think Impervious Rex, like his whole family basically died. And everything was blamed on his house afterwards. He's like, well, screw this. I'm gone.
Now I only fight for money. Sorry. Go ahead.
Van Roth began field testing as soon as his forces arrived at Veloria, deploying units to capture live Tyranids, and observing their behavior when in the presence of the orc technology. He found the original crown was the only one that had any effect, and even then, only when it was worn by captured mechs. After weeks of failures, he received word of an Ork fleet arriving in orbit, too fast to evacuate everyone. If the Imperials wanted to withdraw successfully, they needed to move to a new position so their ships could reach them without being destroyed in orbit. Van Roth planned to use Deathwatch elements to infiltrate areas of the large mountain range, among whose foothills they had deployed, where there were a significant number of Tyranids. Their aim was to lure invading Orks into the Tyranids' midst, using it as a distraction to withdraw. Meanwhile, Van Roth and the others would enter the ruined Haven Spire and destroy it, creating a detonation that would close the mountain path to any greenskins that pursued. The other Imperial commanders, such as Borselia Mung and Deus Glicus, were skeptical of the plan and advised abandoning the crown, but Van Roth refused.
Can you not just put it in your pocket or something?
First of all, it's an Ork crown.
Okay, so it's large. Yes, I get
Put
that.
in your pocket.
It's not like ridiculously large. You could probably wear it as a belt. So I'm guessing, anyways, that these guys want to abandon the crown because it is attracting Tyranids and probably Orks too, right?
I don't think it's attracting Tyranids. It just is like a homing beacon for Orks.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for them.
Oh, okay.
Just as the Imperial plan was about to go underway, they found someone attempting to steal a transport. She claimed to be Inquisitor Avon Muir, and Van Roth met with her immediately. During the meeting, the disturbed Inquisitor informed Van Roth that his plan to destroy the Haven Spire was doomed to fail, as only the Eldar could hope to navigate its corridors in a short time frame. She explained that some Eldar still lived on Valoria, and if Van Roth wanted to succeed, he needed their help. With Muir's help, the Imperials met with Eldar commanders from Biel Tan, Simhan, and Dragon Dancer's Corsairs. In exchange for their help, the Eldar insisted on being given safe passage off-world. Yes?
Pardon me, but this sounds like they're having to do the one thing that humans aren't good at. Diplomacy!
Exactly.
Sorry. We were just talking about that, and I was like, oh no, this isn't going to work. It's hard to be diplomatic when every time that a Xenos talks, you're just like, damn you, Xenos! Sorry. I got ahead of myself. Continue.
Xeno scum! I mean, yes. What were you saying again?
Yes, I would love to work with you, damn Xenos scum. And from all the Xenos that I know anyways, you're probably the least sickening to look at. That was nice, wasn't it? Huh?
If I could see your face, I'm sure it'd be... I mean...
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
In exchange for the help, the Eldar insisted on being given safe passage off-world. Van Roth reluctantly agreed to their terms. No, who would have thought that? The Imperial
Well, you know
Eldar...
he was going to betray them at the last second, so they were stuck on the planet, right? This is an Inquisitor.
And even better, it's a Ordo Xenos Inquisitor, right? Yeah. I'm pretty sure anyways. The Imperial Eldar allied force split into 3 groups in hopes that at least one would reach the command center. Captain Glicus and Corsair Prince Lendathai led one group. Borselia Mung and Farseer Yeltiok led another. And the third was led by Van Roth, Autarch Balandiel, and Warlock Antithus. Each group was accompanied by Deathwatch warriors and Van Roth's agents. However, the Imperials were unaware that the crown was drawing many Orks to the Imperial base.
So, well, hang on half a second. Why were these other guys wanting them to ditch the crown then beforehand? If they were unaware that it was bringing Orks to their area, why were they like, yeah, we should get rid of this thing? Was it actually attracting Tyranids?
Now it's attracting orcs. I think they're seeing it as basically a lost cause for one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And for another thing,
Please don't tell me that their excuse was, well, it's too heavy to carry.
no.
Okay.
I think in most cases they're going, who knows what this is doing to everything, and eventually they do realize that yes, it is causing them to draw orcs.
Well, they eventually, I understand they eventually figured that out. I'm just wondering, anyways, why they wanted to get rid of it in the first place. I'm
Probably
thinking
because
maybe it was just the concept, anyways, that it was Xenos technology, and they're just like, ugh, we shouldn't be using this stuff. It's heresy.
I think part of it was the fact that maybe they wouldn't have had to take the time to go through the whole Haven Spire destruction thing if they just blew it all up, maybe. I'm not 100% sure on that.
There's something that I was kind of wondering about. But anyways, what happens to these guys? They make it off the planet?
Well, as Van Roth's forces and the Eldar explored the Haven Spire, they moved slowly because, there's nothing more important than moving slowly in a combat zone. In the first hours, there was no sign of the enemy, but eventually they came into contact with hostiles. Berselia Mung's group voxed for aid, but none came as Van Roth's group could not reach their positions. He ordered his own forces move more quickly, but subsequently lost contact with their rearguard troops. Within minutes, fighting broke out as Eldar Corsairs, Tempestus Scions, and Inquisitor agents were ripped apart by Gene Stealers. It was only thanks to the Deathwatch warriors that the entire group wasn't overwhelmed.
Okay, so that's why I'm wondering if this crown wasn't also bringing in Tyranids. Maybe, okay, so bear with me, Yuksen. I'm thinking, anyways, the reason why they wanted to get rid of this thing in the first place was because, like, it's attracting all the Tyranids.
It's attracting everything.
And then they found out later, oh, and it's attracting the orcs too. Great. That's what I'm thinking, anyways. That's why they wanted to get rid of it. But it is kind of hearsay at this point. They're just kind of, at this point, kind of screwed, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Carry on, sir.
I just love how it's like, we'll move slowly. You're in tunnels.
I'm thinking that they're moving.
That's one of the worst places to be moving slowly when there's Tyranids involved.
Yuksen, I think that they're moving slowly because they're trying to figure out which way to go. Not because they're just like, you know what would be better is if we had tea every 15 minutes so that we're just like slowly meandering down the tunnels. I think it was more along the lines that they're trying to figure out which way they were actually supposed to be going. So every time that you come to a divide in the road, it's like, okay, let's stop, figure out which way we're going, which, yes, sucks. But at the same time, I would rather do that than pick that tunnel. And it's the wrong way. So, anyways, speaking of rabbit trails, how's Van Roth doing on his? There's a segue for you.
Van Roth refused to retreat, even as his own party seemed doomed to destruction. After many running battles in his passageways, Van Roth and the remnants of his party reached the crashed vessel's bridge. Atark Belandiel had been slain while many of the Deathwatch had fallen, and Barcelia Mung was soon discovered to be dead. There was no sign of Gleekus and no word of his group. Nonetheless, Van Roth ordered Entithris to initiate the Haven Spire's destruction, something that took the Xenopsyker over half an hour. During that time, he had to fend off several more Gene Stealer attacks. With the self-destruct initiated, Van Roth decided to blast their way out through the hole rather than go through the dangerous paths they had arrived in. However, after breaking out, the Imperials and Eldar discovered that their Valkyrie transports were now flaming wrecks before a crashing Imperial cruiser smashed straight into the ground as the blast of the Haven Spire consumed them.
Okay, so real quick, I know that Van Roth has made some dumb decisions in this whole thing, but that's just the worst luck.
I know, it's like we blast out, and it's like,
we made it.
And then they look and they just see their ships in flames, and they're like,
And
the
then
Imperial cruiser is starting to fall and just going, oh, great.
And they
And the
just look-
explosion envelops them from the thing that they were trying to escape.
it's like, oh, we see our planes are on fire, and then they look up and they're like, oh, and is that an Imperial cruiser about to drop on my head? Yes. Yeah.
It doesn't matter anyways. Can I get blown up from this thing that we self-destructed?
Oh, it was like the worst luck ever. But what happened to the rest of them?
Well, meanwhile, the Deathwatch entrusted with the crown successfully crossed the mountain range with limited opposition and set up a camp at the foot, ready to withdraw as soon as the Xenos were fully established in battle. As they watched the Orks land, Tyranids were drawn in and fighting broke out between the two Xenos armies. Deathwatch librarian Heathabar was satisfied that the two sides were totally occupied and ordered a withdrawal. The Deathwatch fought a literal uphill battle to escape against the increasing number of Xenos arrivals. However, as Heathabar arrived, he saw the destroyed transports and knew they were doomed. While their last moments were never recorded, one must assume that they were all killed to a man, either by Orks or Tyranids. Now that that's done, can you please tell a story that doesn't involve the bugs?
Well, oh, I know. How about the Battle of Port Demesnes? It involves your second favorite Xenos race, the Harlequins.
Sure, that sounds great. Wait a minute. Does it also have bugs in it?
No, actually, not a single one.
Awesome. Very well. Let's have at it.
All right. Well, the Battle of Port Demesnes was a conflict fought between the Space Marines of the Deathwatch and the Harlequin Eldari of the Mask of the Midnight Sorrow on Coheria, the crystalline moon of the Imperial war world of Port Demesnes. The Harlequin troop was led by none other than Farseer Eldred Uthran of the craft world Uthway.
Oh, yeah, that guy.
You know of Eldred Uthran?
Obviously, he's the guy that hung out with John Grammaticus and...
Oh, no. Not him. I thought this was another guy. Had the same name.
Eldred Ulthran is long-lived, having lived longer than 10,000 years.
Okay, well, it's that guy. Anyways.
By the way, for those who want to know, we did a Vox on John Grammaticus.
Yep.
Wonderful person he is.
You know, a little bit of a rabbit trail here. I don't personally have a problem with John Grammaticus as himself. It's just his storyline is so obtuse.
It's like somebody went on an acid trip.
Yep. Well, an acid trip, but then they had to like stick him into all the important things that took place during the Horus Heresy. You know, the funny thing is that he reminds me a lot, anyways, of like Erebus, but on the concept that he's like the innocent bystander as opposed to Erebus, who's really just trying to screw everything up. Grammaticus is just the innocent bystander that just keeps getting kicked into all these different situations. Anyways, regardless. As the craft world Eldari forces fell upon the population, the cacophony of Port Demesnes' giant industrial complexes were drowned out by the screams of the terrified and dying. The entire planet was on high alert within solar hours. Ancient Vox protocols were triggered that saw the warp echo with the mind whales of the port's astropaths. In the cold depths of space, the scattered assets of the Imperium mobilized. But they were too slow and too far away to shield the planet's heartland. After the first night, a dozen of Port Demesnes' critical defense sites had been overrun by the Eldari, some clad in jet black, others in bloody crimson. Outraged, the sector's high command responded to the attack in a predictable, thuggish fashion. The Imperium's nose had been bloodied on their watch, and they reacted with an indignant show of strength, just as the Eldari had known they would. Bulk landers emerged from the fog of war to land with earth-shattering booms. In the midst of the fighting, battalions of soldiers marched from the cavernous holds, and regiments of rugged tanks churned the ground to mud. At first, the show of force was all but impotent. For the reinforcements were too slow to mobilize, that they found that the Eldari had vanished from whichever theater of war they hunted them in. As the war effort unfolded, and the endless stream of Imperial reinforcements began to cover the planet's surface, the Eldari had no refuges left to them. Before long, 3 of the planet's 4 continents were burned with the fires of all-out war as the Imperial forces closed in. For all the doom and destruction meted out upon Port Demesnes, the truth behind the war was worse still. The invasion was only a ruse, engineered by the most far-seeing of Eldari strategists, and the true strike was falling elsewhere. The prize they sought was so vital, so pivotal in the wider destiny of their race, that they had sent tens of thousands of irreplaceable Eldari lives into a full military campaign that was ultimately little more than a decoy. The war for Port Demesnes was immense. It had all the hallmarks of a critical engagement that would decide the fate of a capital world and the star system beyond. Fire rained from the skies, sprawling cities burned to ash, and rivers of blood ran in the streets. Yet to the Eldred Uthran and the players of the Troop of the Midnight Sorrow, it was a necessary evil, a sideshow to distract from the main event, the fate of Coheria, Port Demesnes' moon, where the population of Port Demesnes numbered in the dozens of billions. The glittering white orb of Coheria was entirely abandoned by mankind, thought cursed for many long generations. Those who had attempted to settle it in the past had been driven to distraction by the constant low serration of whispers that haunted the cusp of hearing day and night. The white sands of the moon, glinting like snowdrifts in the stellar light, were formed of a mildly psychoactive crystal, shards of precious stone ground to powder by the erosion of the eons. Though none alive knew it, Coheria had been on the edge of the ancient Eldari Empire at the time of Slaanesh's birth, and was saturated by psychic residue. Though individually tiny, when held together, the numberless grains of crystal that render the moon's surface white had absorbed immense psychic potential. Though Coheria had long been lost to the collective consciousness of the Eldari race, at the close of the 41st millennium, it was rediscovered by Illic Nightspear and the star-stalking outcast of the craft world, Eliotic. The discovery, when revealed to the seer councils of the other Asuriani craft worlds, set in motion this series of galaxy-changing events. When Eldred Uthran of the craft world Uthway learned of Coheria's strange sands, the seeds of an idea germinated in his fathomless mind. He cast it mentally into the sea of potential and followed the path of its voyage to the skein of glittering futures. There was physical danger there, for the ruin that represented the brutish imperium of man, and worse still, their elite space marines, orbited the crux of fate, splitting it into several possible futures. After consulting with Caesodorus, the Anchorite, a visionary farseer who had long ago locked himself in the wraith-bone heart of Uthway, Uldred resolved to investigate the moon in person, but he would need assistance in stealth. Hundreds of Terran years previously, Eldred had found common cause with a death jester known as Inram's Spectre, and the farseer reached out with his psyche to contact his morbid ally. Now, before I keep going, Yuksen, could you please explain to the people what a death jester is?
Certainly. Death jesters are, well, let's first just go by example of how they act and how they dress. You see them, they have a skull-like mask. Their armor is supposed to be incorporating the bones of their prior predecessors. They're seen generally on the field of battle, sometimes chuckling or humming softly, giving deep bows or mocking clappings of hands to the music of how people have died. They have a very, very grisly humor. They also are...
Really? The death jester has a grisly humor?
Oh, yeah. And they go to the points of thinking it would be worthwhile to, for example, just wound a heavy weapon trooper so that the trooper will blow away the thing that they're protecting, and find that as very humorous.
So the guy's like, let me see if I got that. I understand that. It's like somebody's like firing like a heavy bolter or something, so they shoot him in the leg. So as they go down, anyways, they just keep firing and blow up whatever.
Yeah. It's like, we're supposed to protect this statue. And the person gets shot and starts just annihilating it with his heavy bolter. Yeah. Didn't find that as very amusing. And another way to put it is there's one of them, I have a quote from one of them is, do you believe that your actions are your own? That it is free will that guides your hand? You're but puppets dancing upon strings held in death's cold claw. So come, dance for me upon the stage of battle. Fight for me, scream for me, die for me. This is kind of their mentality.
Sounds like a fun person to have a beer with.
Though their outfit looks cool. I just saying.
Yeah, okay, I'll give you that anyways. The Death Jester, I mean, they do look terrifying. I mean, well, they're supposed to. I mean, especially on the battlefield. And they've got, what are they? They're called shrieker cannons.
Yeah.
Which
and if you
are like very much
these
like
are Harlequins, so they appear like out of the middle of nowhere. So just imagine this guy all of a sudden showing up like right next to you and like giving you like a deep bow and then like shooting somebody. It's just like, what the heck? This guy pops out of the middle of nowhere, humming. Like, who the? Oh,
yeah. I honestly, Yuksen, I don't know why you like these guys, but anyways, thank you for the explanation. Anywho, though his mask had needed him to defend the Black Library against the sorcerer Horemon, Interim's Spectre answered the summons. Before the year was out, Aldred was escorted through the webway to Coheria by a maverick troop of the Midnight Sorrow.
Oh, as a side note, Death Jesters don't technically have to follow their masks orders to kind of do their own thing.
Oh, interesting.
That's probably why he was able to just go, peace
out. Well, okay, so they sound like they're almost like mavericks, right? They just kind of do what they want to do.
Yeah. I mean, they're just like, I'm glad to have you, but if you want to go, that's fine too.
Anyways, the Death Jester had listened to Eldred's plan, and since that day, the potential of it had burned like the rune of new hope within his mind. It was a ploy of such vaunting ambition, so redolent with the star-forging grandeur of the ancient Eldari race, that the warrior dancer and his kinsmen found its lure irresistible. Eldred had long believed in the possibility of rousing a new Eldari deity, Yened, the god of the dead. Many a doom-laden seer believed Yened would awaken to destroy Slaanesh, that diabolical chaos god who we've talked about many of times that will devour the Eldari soul. But legend had it that this would only come to pass after every Eldari in the galaxy had already left their mortal coil. Eldred dared to hope that he could awaken Yened before then, and in doing so, save a fraction of the Eldari race, enough to slowly regrow their population without the leering hunger of Slaanesh, forcing them into lives of endless torment.
Brother, this is all very interesting, but where are the Deathwatch? We are supposed to be talking about them, remember?
You know, funny you should say that, because the Corvus Blackstar lethal intent soared through the thin atmosphere of Coheria. The planet had long been forsaken, the hab blocks thrown up by the ancient Demesnian settlers no more than jutting ruins upon the horizon. Despite the strange mist banks that swirled like slow-motion tempests around part of the planet's surface, the lethal intense scry augurs registered the atmosphere as still breathable. Better yet, the drifts of crystal powder that passed for its surface were firm enough to land the Space Marines aircraft on. Watch Captain Artemis and his battle brothers noted with focused interest the flicker of engagement sigils upon the periphery of the Cogitator readout. They knew there must be more Eldari upon Coheria when the scans registered as humanoid, but not Imperial. Xeno's presence was confirmed by the data latest of the Storm Raven that was deploying the Deathwatch Venerable Dreadnought Nihilus nearby. Artemis's decision to leave Port Demesnes war zone against orders was one step closer to being vindicated. If the Eldari were working some nefarious scheme, and the Watchforce Artemis could slay them in time to prevent it. Perhaps they could return to Talassa Prime in victory, rather than disgrace. A split second after Artemis ordered the attack, his combat veterans took heavy fire. The thickening mists were no wider than Eldari's wrist, but the incoming projectiles were impossibly sharp. Where they scored telling hits, they sliced through ceramite to draw blood, slash fingers from hands, or take limbs from torsos. A hollow laugh rang eerily in the mist as a shuriken slashed the eye from a battle brother's head in a spray of broken visor glass and murky liquids. The Deathwatch were already returning fire. Even those who were badly wounded shot from the hip without faltering. Kraken bolts hammered out in the gloom towards the long-limbed figures, cavorting on the cusp of vision. Here and there, a satisfying boom rang out as bolt shells struck something solid and detonated hard. Artemis leveled shot after shot as he charged forward, struggling to see the tall-helmed Farseer through the mist. His vanguard elements boosted alongside him with a roar of jump-packed engines. There was a sudden storm of multicolored light, and the mist flashed 100 shades at once, and the tall Eldari was gone. Actinic lightning blast from the mist, a skein of electricity that left runic symbols behind Artemis's eyes as it hurled him skidding sidelong into a drift of crystal sand. A red-stockinged foot pressed his helmet down, seeking to trap him immobile for a coup de grace, but the watch captain jabbed his power sword high, impaling the Harlequin. He sprang up, gripping the fallen body and breaking its spine, even as he used it as a shield against the blinding laser beam that shot him from the gloom. The corpse came apart in a puff of blood. Sleek-hulled attack craft swooped through the swirling, shimmering mist, adding to the confusion with crackling lasers and shuriken volleys. The Deathwatch, knowing that to remain stationary was to court disaster, had already spread out into pairs. What had started as a meeting of battle lines had devolved into a fast-paced hunt in the mists. Artemis growled in frustration. In the battle of agility, the Eldari held all the cards. Then there was a sudden whoomp of ignition as a swath of the battlefield was consumed in plasma fire. Spindle-limbed Xenos danced spasmodically as they melted to nothing in the intense flames. The dreadnought Nihilus stomped into the fray from the west, Stormbolter barking as it tracked a passing jet bike. A long-hafted Harlequin blade lashed out, deftly slicing through the weapon system's ammo feed. But Nihilus had fought the Eldari before and knew the tolerances of the plasma cannon well. A second explosion of eye-searing energies, and the jet bike, brightly uniformed riders and all, was reduced to scattering ash. The tide of battle ebbed back and forth as each side attempted to encircle the other, only to find itself ambushed in turn. The mist swirled thick, the dull crump of explosions, and the high shriek of dying Xenos sounding strangely far away. Barking curt imperatives to fight on to the last man, Artemis plunged into the thickest part of the mist, seeking its source. He was determined to slay every last Eldari upon Coheria, even if he died in the process. All around the Deathwatch, faces that they swear were familiar flashed in and out of the gloom. Visages of the dead, of sisters and brothers, of the hated, of heroes long passed into legend. They blurred together, laughing, crying, a surreal kaleidoscope of imagery punctuated by intense flashes of gory violence. The distorted masks of the Harlequins, combined with the strangely reflected mists, left Watchforce Artemis with no option but to fight on using only their instincts, trusting their hearts instead of their heads. The vanguard of the Deathwatch force aimed their assault towards the highest concentration of Harlequins. They lashed out with the thunder hammers and power mauls, but their targets simply vaulted and tumbled over the attacks, as if in a long practice performance.
Yet, as their foes dodged, however, two of the veterans flicked frag grenades from the maglock points of their belts, and the sudden detonation sent 3 Harlequins reeling. It was all the opportunity the Space Marines needed. Heavy hammers arced overhead to smash dazed Harlequins into mangled heaps of broken bone and burst flesh, blood painting black ceramite red.
Then a cruelly laughing death jester was among them. A point-blank volley sliced an armored torso into ragged meat, the shuriken's poison sending vital organs splattering with a bang. A blow from the scythe blade took a battle brother's jaw, cutting his battle cry to a single gurgling word, death, before Enrim's specter pushed a plasma grenade into his ruined mouth. Brother Galatiel kicked out hard, sending the Death Jester rolling into the mist. Despite being blinded by 100 stimuli, Watch Captain Artemis fought on with primal savagery. Once more, his mind told him he was surrounded by warriors, hungry to devour him, similar to the same murderous kinsmen that had cut him down on his homeworld of Pasul. The hungry faces of the Harlequins masked loomed large in the mist. Artemis spun and slashed, punched and stamped, crunched his helm into the face of one assailant and his elbow into the throat of another. He fought like a captured beast, proud and ferocious, but every return blow somehow connected, drawing blood from him with each strike. The watch captain felt a curved blade slide into his lower back. Another came in to sever his hand at the wrist, but glanced hard from the metal of Artemis's bionic arm. He spun, his mind flaring with pain as he ripped the sword lodged in his back from his attacker's hand. He shoved hard and primed his stasis bomb before flinging it towards the dancing shadows. A mind-numbing detonation and a shroud of stillness froze Artemis's assailants, as if trapping them in a glacier. The mist, banished by the arcane explosion, parted to reveal grinning Eldari trapped in the last act of a play that would never end. An arrowhead-shaped gunship swerved abruptly to avoid being caught in the dislocation of time and space that rippled out from the stasis bomb's detonation. The machine's evasive maneuver put it right in the path of Dreadnought Nihilus, who took some relish in backhanding it into scrap with a blow from his giant Dreadnought power fist. Artemis gave a shout of joy. With a single strike, the tide had turned. Eldred Uthrin, meanwhile, had taken into account every eventuality that he could foresee unfolding on Coheria, with the exception of one. He had foreseen the Imperial attack, slowed its advance with a web of words, and laid an ambush of blades to repel it. And yet, there remained a future he had not factored into his plans. In his meditation, the High Farseer had glimpsed a fold in chronology, a ruction in the imprecise nature of the scheme. It hid a divergent thread of destiny that led away from his carefully sculpted plans and cause and effect. Eldred had examined the temporal anomaly, but dismissed it as a false vision, for he saw no way for a species as lowly and backwater as humanity to affect the passage of time itself. With the detonation of Artemis's stasis bomb, fate's path veered sharply away from which Eldred had intended. The Deathwatch fought clear of the mind-altering mist that was dissipating around them and brought their full might to bear. The Harlequins were revealed at last, in all their splendor, and those not caught within the stasis field were attacked with renewed vigor. The High Farseer of Ulthwé fought only in his own defense, for he was consumed with the culmination of a far greater work. All around Eldred, the crystal seers glowing brighter and brighter with cold and colorless light, throwing the twilight of the battleground into a stark new dawn. The Harlequins evaded many kill shots and leapt high to escape the crushing blows of the Deathwatch vanguard, but they could not dodge forever the hurricane of fury brought to bear upon them. Pressing their attack, the Deathwatch surrounded the remaining Harlequins, gunning down one troop and sending the other scattered as Nihilus's plasma blast seared in from the flank. Artemis ran to the crest of the sand drift, lashing out to decapitate the rider of a Skyweaver jet bike as it shot past. The blow sent the vehicle careening into an outcrop of eroded Imperial ruins. The resultant explosion saw a skull-masked figure springing high within the shelter of the rubble, flipping, somersaulting, and landing in a stumbling crouch. Artemis was already running, taking advantage of his adversary's distraction to press his bolt pistol into the back of the figure's skull-masked head. The watch captain smiled grimly in anticipation of the kill. Unbeknownst to him, the masked Eldari grinned too. Slowly, the Eldari laid down his long-barreled cannon. He made a sound reminiscent of a herald clearing his throat and held out a hand in a stylized gesture of declaration. "If you slay me tonight," he said, his high Gothic perfectly enunciated, "the fates shall align to bless our mutual foes."
Trust not the Eldar,
said Artemis, his words thick with hatred. "We are the sons of death, you and I. We bring oblivion in order to deny chaos. We cannot afford to thwart one another when the greater enemy stands on the cusp of victory. The gilded finger bones lining the edge of the creature's cloak gleamed in harsh light as the crystal statues glowed bright all around. Artemis narrowed his eyes. A similar raiment was worn by the chaplains of his own Mortifactors chapter in their hall's celebrations. Strangely, he could not sense duplicity in this one. Walk away, and a dire blow shall fall upon the arch enemy. Is your distrust so deep you would rather kill me now than spare the doom of 1 trillion human souls?
Yes, said Artemis, pulling the trigger to end the creature's life. Eldred Uthran screamed as the ritual reached its crescendo. All around, the crystal sands of Coheria glowed bright. A bow wave of spiritual power rippled across the moon as the soul of every dead craft world since the fall of the Eldari lent a measure of its sentience. But a vital voice in the choir of his psychic melange had been silenced, and the blessings of the laughing god were fading away. Wrathbone ruins whirled around Uldred, burning to smoking ash, one by one, as the High Farseers struggled to hold the ritual of awakening together. His mind was aflame, the skies above bursting into bright orange fire and sympathy. Psychic energies heated the planetoid to volcanic temperatures. The moon became a psychic sun, a signifier of a new dawn. Somewhere in the bottomless soulscape of the void, Yuned at last stirred to wakefulness. Another sun blossomed on the cusp of fate, far smaller and filled with malevolence. Eldred opened one eye to see a plasma sphere burning towards him. He directed a portion of his psychic focus into his rune armor to dissipate the blast. In that act, he failed. The ritual disturbed, the emergent consciousness of the new Eldari god splintered, its full apotheosis and awakening denied. The crystal seers shattered with terrific force, even as Space Marines sprinted for their assault craft as the crystalline moon exploded around them. Eldred reeled, stumbling blindly through the webway gate behind him as the planet ignited with white fire. The last thing he saw was a vast of solemn constellations losing cohesion, a single bright point from within it shooting away into the far reaches of the cosmos. Yet the god of the dead had stirred in his dreamless sleep. Even as his full consciousness remained quiescent, he reached out across the galaxy to find his herald, an Eldari who had served with many of her species' different kindreds, and even then was battling in the arenas of Kamarach. She would be the prophet of the new age, and complete the awakened Eldred Uthran had begun. Her name was Yvonne. Well, what do you think of Artemis's decision, as well as this whole battle, brother?
From his perspective, it would be the right choice to make. I mean, I'm somebody that's talking after they've slaughtered a bunch of your guys.
I hear you.
Yeah,
That whole
Don't
I
kill
come
me.
in peace. What about all the guys you just murdered?
Yeah.
Well, that was before when I thought I could win. I don't know, man. It's one of those, anyways. If you read the story and the history behind it, you can see, anyways, the faultiness of Artemis. But like you said, anyways, I wholeheartedly agree with you. Anyways, if you're on the battlefield, yeah, I would have probably done the same thing Artemis did. That whole concept, I don't even think I would have had that much of a conversation with him. I think I would have just pulled the trigger.
Yeah.
He would have started talking and then just boom. Well, here's the other thing too, is that in the grand picture, it still probably helps humanity, right?
But him shooting the other guy?
Yeah. Well, not just shooting the other guy, but stopping this ritual.
Well, it depends on what the dead Eldari god would end up doing.
Well, it sounds like the Eldari, while as much as they are willing to negotiate and work with humans, they still, anyways, they're aliens. They are out for the Eldari. So it wouldn't shock me at all, anyways, if this Yuned, anyways, is just like, yeah, we're going to save the Eldari. Well, if you save the Eldari and they become far more powerful, what happens to the humans?
Right.
I mean, they get swept aside like wheat on a field.
Maybe not. Maybe they turn into, being occupied. Except for the numbers of the Eldari are so few in comparison to humans at this point.
Right, but I mean, if they gain some of their gods back, I mean, it's just like anyways with humanity, anyways, when the Emperor came into being, or well, came into power. This changes everything.
Right.
That's my thought process behind it. Well, you got any other thoughts, anyways, on just how the Deathwatch, anyways, are kind of portrayed? Now, mind you, we also have to keep in mind, anyways, that a lot of the stuff the Deathwatch does isn't really recorded.
Well, yeah. I
Good
mean,
purpose. This is
it's
sneaky.
yeah, exactly.
So the stuff that we could find, anyways, well, if you notice, anyways, all except for probably the last story that we told, anyways, they all kind of take a back seat
Right.
to whatever else is going on. But from the stories that we kind of brought here, anyways, what do you think?
The majority of the ones that also do seem to be recorded are ones where they end up, if they're not barely involved, end up them losing. You noticed?
Well, no, those are the ones that you brought up. I mean, they won on Damnos, and they definitely won on the last one. Artemis was definitely triumphant in that last one, but I know there's that backwash, anyways. It's like, well, he kind of ruined something that could have, defeated Slanesh. Well, on that note, we are out of time. I apologize. Yet again, we went a little bit longer this week, but yet again, it's the Deathwatch. And they've got some cool stories. But join us next week for our favorite part of the month. Notable characters.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this Vox. Feel free to like, follow, subscribe, and comment. And don't forget to check out the shop. We got some cool stuff there, like clothes, pillows, and hats. Oh, and we can't forget the Elurapoda Melanolucal.
The what?
The panda bears.
No. Oh. Touche, sir. Touche. Yes. We can't forget the bears. Also, don't forget to put in your questions in the comments. So we have a boatload of them for our Q&A at the end of the month, which is in 2 weeks, yes?
Yeah.
Cool.
Have a great day. And as always, until next time.
This is Zeckthar,
And Yuksen.
signing off.